Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the brutality, the anger, and the celebration of the brutality, the inhumanity, the animalistic savagery. It turned my stomach. I watched those social media clips. I don't recommend it for anyone of any age. The multiple murders perpetrated in Israel, the mass murder, the behavior displayed by smiling Hamas terrorists was subhuman. It was an organized mass murder of civilians, of Jews, a mass murder of Jews in the Jewish state. If you are plagued over the question of why these terrorists taped and then posted these horrific real-time tapes of their own butchery, it's because you have a heart and you have a soul. They do not. If you cannot comprehend how anyone can justify or even side with the perpetrators of these atrocious acts, this atrocious behavior, the murder and the violence, it is because you are guided by a moral compass. They are not. Most real animals do not even behave as these Hamas terrorists behaved. Their savagery continued even after killing Jews. The celebrations of the mass murders were sickening. The burning of people alive, sickening. These mass murderers, these terrorists, and their leaders, spiritual, political, and supporters, have a different and warped sense of right and wrong. The terror they perpetrate was pre-modern, even medieval. The murderers embraced their own behavior. They believe that they were right to kidnap an 85-year-old woman, that there is nothing evil in taking a 2-year-old hostage. They believe that they are justified in mowing down at least 260 innocent concert partiers just because they were Jewish. They believe that their coordinated terror attack will strike a death blow to the heart of Israel. They think that this mass murder will send Israelis packing. They are wrong. There is a reason behind the madness of the posting of their videos on social media, and it's not a reason any sane person could even imagine or comprehend. They do not care that the Western world will condemn their actions as unjust, which I hear all the time. Why did they do it? Why did they do it? They don't care at all about the Western world. They care only about their world, the Arab and Muslim world. These Hamas terrorists and their Hamas handlers posted their clips in an organized attempt to galvanize and unite Arabs and Muslims around the world to join in the battle against the Jews. First, they want Palestinians in the West Bank to join. Next, they want Lebanon and Syria to join. Finally, want the rest of the entirety of the Arab and Muslim world to join. And that, of course, includes Iran. This Hamas model, which was undoubtedly and unequivocally designed by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, is now currently laid out for all the Arabs and Muslims to see and to be motivated to join. It is so very simple. It's all about math. Overwhelm the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome is extremely limited. It can only intercept only a few rockets at a time. It's powered by only so many anti-missile units and so many interceptors. So if enemies send over significantly more rockets than the Iron Dome can intercept, those other rockets will overwhelm the system and get through and strike their target, Israel. At last count, 6,000 rockets were launched at Israel. Many did not hit their targets, but the terrorists did not need too many to succeed. The numbers were simply overwhelming. Overrun the border crossing, the army base, the Jewish communities, the towns situated near the border, the towns and communities that were attacked. Massive numbers of terrorists swarmed across the border, and the fence and the wall and the crossing, the border crossing, and the Israeli military base. The swarm of people was impossible to stop. It was the Sabbath, and it was the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah in Israel. And it was manned by only a skeleton crew. This is Iran's style. It's part and parcel of their strategy. Swarming and overwhelming is a technique Iran has used successfully. They've used it against U.S. naval vessels in the Persian Gulf. They render a U.S. naval vessel virtually powerless to respond and to confront swarming Iranian rubber speedboats. As for those who lend support and justify this murderous behavior, those who embrace the barbarism or say it doesn't even exist, they're not just morally bankrupt. They are aiding and abetting mass murder. And they were doing it because they, too, hate and despise Jews. Hate and despise Jews so much that they con and convince themselves into believing that it is justified to murder Jews in any way, shape, or form that presents itself. They call it self-defense. The mass murder of innocents cannot be justified. Innocent men and women and children of all ages, innocents, including babies. There are now confirmed IDF reports that in Kibbutz Kfar Aza, 40 infants were brutally murdered, 40 children dead, decapitated, beheaded by these evil monsters masquerading as human beings. Yes, bystanders in Gaza have been killed. Yes, Israel warned them and advised them to evacuate. Hamas told them if they leave, Hamas would murder them. These civilians mean nothing to Hamas leadership. They are human shields. Hamas hides behind them, living in and near hospitals, residential neighborhoods and buildings, schools, even near the UN facilities. They are mass murderers and terrorists, responsible for the deaths not only of the Jews they despise, but of their own. Know this: Israel will win. Israel has no choice but to win. Know also that Israel will fight and win according to Israeli standards and the guidelines of Jewish morality. Israel will neither be weakened nor pressured to stop by the United States or others. Understand that for Israel this is not an issue of revenge or retaliation. It is Israel standing firm and reminding their enemies, their many enemies, that Israel is here to stay. Israel is not afraid. It is those that attack the Jewish state who should now be quaking in fear. Coming up next, Points of View. First up is a column from the Wall Street Journal published on October 9th, 2023, and the piece is written by Gil Troy. It's entitled, Israel Faces Its 9/11, subtitled, Amid the shock and horror, the nation stands together with moral clarity and resolve. Troy aptly, movingly, clearly explains the experience of living in Israel as the nightmare unfolds. He describes the wide range of emotions coursing through the hearts and minds of Israelis as the Hamas massacre on Simchat Torah morning unfolds. This is how Troy begins. Historical analogies are always tricky, but it's hard to avoid the thought that Saturday was Israel's 9/11. At least 300 are dead, hundreds wounded, and possibly dozens kidnapped in the country the size of New Jersey. Death, destruction, and mayhem rained down on the Jewish state, but so did the moral clarity and resolve that characterizes democracies under attack and that terrorists always underestimate. It shouldn't be necessary to say, but the vicious, wide-scale attack Hamas launched against Israelis sleeping at home, waiting in bus stops, walking the streets, going to synagogue, living in nursing homes, is reprehensible and inexcusable. The videos Palestinians have proudly posted of terrorists going house to house, an Israeli man in shorts handcuffed, a woman screaming on a motorcycle, being taken away to Gaza as hostages are chilling. The story of Yoni Asher, 37, whose wife, 5 and 3-year-old daughters, and mother-in-law were apparently abducted to Gaza, is heartbreaking. Videos of an Israeli woman's corpse being spit on by terrorists is barbaric. One wonders if any left-wingers who have spent years justifying and thus encouraging Palestinian terrorism will reevaluate their narrative of poor, defenseless Palestinians victimized by Israeli bullies. Now Troy hones in on the 9/11 analogy. On 9/11. The 9/11 analogy goes deeper than the sheer evil terrorists perpetrated and the delight their enablers took in massive loss of life. America on September 10th, 2001 was complacent. The 9/11 Commission reported not only that the nation was unprepared for the attack, but that President Bill Clinton, had passed over opportunities to kill Osama bin Laden. It turned out that hours before the attack, Mr. Clinton said of bin Laden that, quote, "I nearly got him," unquote, but he feared the collateral damage. Israel has been too divided over domestic issues, domestic politics, ignoring that the true danger lurks outside the country. Both September 11th and October 7th demonstrate the perils of being too sentimental about your enemies. Since 2005, when Israel withdrew from all of the Gaza for the sake of peace, it has repeatedly struggled with Mr. Clinton's dilemma. What do you do when your enemy hides behind civilians? A functional nation is most responsible for protecting its own citizens, especially when threatened by adversaries who respect no rules of war or simple decency. And Israel needs to do what it takes to protect its citizens. As President Biden tweeted on Saturday, Israel has the right to defend itself, full stop. Hamas doesn't care about Israeli life, or Palestinian life, for that matter. Palestinian culture, however, worships land. This round of fighting mustn't end until Israel has created an extended buffer zone protecting every Israeli, even if it requires bulldozing houses and evacuating Gazans. They will call it ethnic cleansing, but it is wholly justified self-defense. Going forward, any violence of any kind from Gaza Strip should be met by an expansion of the buffer zone, 10 yards at a time. This Saturday morning, my family and I awoke to sirens in Jerusalem at 8:20 a.m., approximately 2 hours after the Hamas terrorists started swarming Israel's border, less than 50 miles from our home. Despite 3 sirens over the next 40 minutes, we kept to our routine, and I went to pray with friends in our regular outdoor minyan, an informal prayer group we started during COVID. We celebrated this special Sabbath, which coincided with Simchat Torah, the Jewish holiday, rejoicing in the teaching and values of the 5 books of Moses. We ended by spontaneously singing Ani Ma'amin, the Holocaust Martyrs' Ballad of Eternal Faith, and Hatikva, Israel's national anthem. Amid the chaos and 7 more sirens, I stood outside in front where we prayed, guarding 40 of our friends unarmed. With terrorists all over your country rampaging, simplifies things in a profound way. When you know what you are willing to die for, you also know what you're willing to live for. That sense of purpose is why Israel will prevail. It makes clear what seems from afar the great anomaly of Israel, which every Israeli understands close up. Israel may have brutal enemies and continuing political challenges, but Israelis rank among the world's happiest people because they share a sense of common destiny, a sense of community, and a sense of purpose that gives their lives meaning amid the danger. Thank you, Gil Troy, for your insight and perspective. Next up is a column by Ori Wertman. This column was published in Ynet on October 9th also, and it's entitled Hamas Documenting Your Own War Crimes is a Double-Edged Sword, subtitled Analysis. In light of the videos showing slaughter of Israeli civilians, global community will rebuff Palestinian attempts to cast themselves as underdog against brutal occupier in short term. This grants us legitimacy to respond. Wertman explains that the videos proudly posted by the Hamas will, in the end, work against them. He begins with some background. The recent attack by Hamas that occurred on Saturday will be remembered as the Jewish state's 9/11. It appears that Israel's strategic approach during the period leading up to this attack was to refrain from completely defeating Hamas. Instead, the goal was to maintain Hamas as a governing authority in Gaza Strip while weakening its military capabilities and deterring further aggression. The objective of Israel's military operations, starting with Operation Cast Lead in 2008 and continuing until recently, was to weaken Hamas's capabilities and limit its role in governing the population in the Gaza Strip. Additionally, Another aim was to foster the development of two rival entities, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas in the Gaza Strip, resulting in a fragmented Palestinian system overall. While the Palestinian Authority is not effectively functioning, Hamas has been actively operating for a significant time, receiving direct support from Iran with the aim of provoking unrest in the West Bank and inciting Palestinian population. Now Wertman dives into his thesis. He writes, "Alas, Hamas miscalculated by initiating the war through a series of attacks aimed at innocent civilians. They deliberately documented these actions to generate a psychological and awareness impact against Israel. The videos and images circulated on social media portraying the brutal killings and abductions of men, women, children, and the elderly by armed individuals and their transportation to the Gaza Strip have become valuable ammunition for Israel in the international battle for public opinion." These graphic images remind the Western world of the disturbing videos they have witnessed from Syria and Iraq over the past decade. The average American internet user or European television viewer struggles to differentiate between Hamas and Islamic State, and they comprehend the formidable adversary Israel faces. By documenting these barbaric acts, we gain immediate legitimacy to take action against the Gaza Strip. Seizing this opportunity and acting swiftly would be advantageous. Now, I disagree with Wertman about several things. As I mentioned in the background briefing, it is clear to me that the video images posted to social media are there to galvanize and unify and stimulate the masses in the entire Muslim world against the Jews. Nevertheless, it is always important to hear and give credence to differing opinions, especially when they're well articulated. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 4 cartoons today. Not all the cartoons are funny. Some are political and very thoughtful and very critical. The theme of all the cartoons is Hamas's Iranian-backed attack on Israel. The first cartoon is about the role of Iran in the massacre. The Ayatollah has a bloody vulture on his arm. The vulture is Hamas. The Ayatollah says to the vulture, "What a good little pet." The next cartoon is a monstrous-looking figure labeled Iran, trudging through a puddle of blood. Iran's hands are covered with gloves, and the gloves are covered with blood, and the gloves have a word, Hamas, written on them. This next cartoon is a depiction of the blue and white flag of Israel. In this image, the Star of David, which sits in the center of the normal Israeli flag, has been replaced with blood. If there's a blood red Star of David, the cartoon is called Attack on Israel. Next up is an octopus. Iran sits as the head of the octopus. The octopus has a missile for a nose. The arms and tentacles are extensions of Iran's dastardly deeds. We see drones to Putin, Hezbollah terrorists, Hamas terrorists, etc. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Former U.S. President Bill Clinton has urged Israeli politicians to put aside their differences and seek unity in the face of Hamas's barbaric attack on southern Israeli communities. Using the social media platform X to convey his message, Clinton wrote, "I condemn the horrific terrorist assault carried out by Hamas in Israel and mourn the senseless loss of life. My heart is with all those affected by the violence, including American families. Now is a time for the world to rally against terrorism and to support Israeli democracy. I stand with the government of Israel and all Israelis and urge them to stand together. This is a moment to focus on purpose over politics." And former U.S. President Barack Obama, too, has joined the choir of condemnations against Hamas's attack on Israel. Posting his remarks on X also, as did the former President Clinton, Obama wrote, and I'm quoting again, All Americans should be horrified and outraged by the brazen terrorist attacks on Israel and the slaughter of innocent civilians. We grieve for those who died, pray for the safe return of those who've been held hostage, and stand squarely alongside our ally, Israel, as it dismantles Hamas. As we support Israel's right to defend itself against terror, we must keep striving for a just and lasting peace for Israelis and Palestinians alike. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is on the move and is expected to visit Moscow. Russian news media has quoted the Palestinian envoy to Moscow saying, and we're quoting again, "We are awaiting an official statement from the Kremlin from the Russian side about when the visit will take place," unquote. Russia's RBC news outlet quoted Palestinian Ambassador Abdul Hafiz Nofal as saying, "An agreement has been reached that Mr. Abbas will come here to Moscow." Separately, the PA ambassador told Russia and Russian state television that the two sides maintain daily contacts. Russian President Vladimir Putin last met with Abbas a year ago on the sidelines of the regional conference in Kazakhstan. Abbas's last visit to Moscow took place 2 years ago. Russia, which has relations with many Arab countries, with Iran, with Hamas, and with Israel, condemned the violence against both sides in this war, and then proceeded to accuse the United States of ignoring the need for an independent Palestinian state. Not surprisingly, Israel has imposed a total blockade on the Gaza Strip in response to the Hamas's massacre of Israeli Jews. Also not surprisingly, the PA media have cheered the terror. One image even depicts Israel as a rat being crushed by Hamas. That's a cartoon, a political cartoon. And pleasantly surprising, several restaurants in Tel Aviv have not been kosher and now are koshering, making them kitchens kosher so that they can help send out food to a large number of Israeli soldiers and reservists now being deployed across Israel because they can't send the food if it's not kosher. Israel named 300th Brigade Deputy Commander Lieutenant Colonel Alim Abdullah as the soldier who died in the clash with the terrorists at the Lebanese border in the north Monday afternoon. Abdullah was 40 and the resident of the Druze village Yanu Jat, and his family have been notified. The IDF said, "We share in the family's grief and will continue to support them." So that happened in the north, where all the other massacres happened in the south. IDF spokesperson's unit reported that the Israel Air Force attacked Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip, including the entrance to an underground terror tunnel utilized by Hamas to infiltrate into Israel. Additionally, Hamas weapons caches, war rooms, and military equipment storerooms were attacked by the IAF, the Israel Air Force. Citing a senior Pentagon official, the New York Times is reporting that American planes loaded with ammunition have already taken off for Israel. The source added that the United States is working to speed up the deliveries of air defense equipment and armaments that Israel has ordered from American companies. At the same time, the Reuters news agency reported from an American source, a security source, that the aircraft carrier USS Gerald Ford will arrive in the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea very soon. That increases the amount of fighter jets available to the United States in the region. On Monday, the European Commission said that aid to Palestinians would not be suspended. The statement directly contradicts an earlier statement made by one of its top officials earlier the same day. The Commission said it was launching a review of its assistance for Palestine following Hamas's attack on Israel at the weekend. According to the second statement, in the meantime, as there were no payments foreseen, there will be no suspension of payments. The earlier statement was released on X by Oliver Verhardy, the European Commissioner for Neighborhood and Enlargement. Addressing world leaders, Israeli President Isaac Herzog said,
"My nation continues to endure a savage attack from a cruel and inhumane enemy. To my mind, not since the Holocaust have so many Jews been killed on one day. And not since the Holocaust have we witnessed scenes of Jewish women and children, grandparents, even Holocaust survivors, being herded into trucks and taken into captivity. Hamas has imported, adopted, and replicated the savagery of ISIS, entering civilian homes on Holy Day and murdering in cold blood whole families. First, most importantly, make clear and loud condemnation of Hamas's actions. Second, those nations that have yet to do so, designate Hamas in its entirety as a terrorist body. Third, make clear that Hamas carries full responsibility and accountability for the well-being of the hostages it has taken and demand their immediate return to Israel.
One day after the mass murder, over 1,000 Jews in Israel. Get that. One day after the mass murder of over 1,000 Jews in Israel. While on stage in Las Vegas, Nevada, Bono, the lead singer for the very popular group U2, mourned the hundreds of Israeli youth murdered by Hamas at the Supernova Nature Party near the Gaza Strip. Bono told the crowd, and this is a quote,
"But our hearts and our anger, you know where that's pointed. So sing with us." And those beautiful kids at that music festival. Early morning, October 7th, as the sun is rising in the desert sky. Stars of David, they took your life, but they could not take your pride. Could not take your pride. Could not take your pride. Could not take the name of love.
A very powerful moment. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one picante piece of information. In the midst of this terrible mass murder, horrific, there were moments of tremendous heroism displayed by Jews, acts of heroism that saved the lives of others. Here is one inspiring story from kibbutz Nir Am, one of the kibbutzim situated just on the border with Gaza. The kibbutz fought off the murderous, marauding terrorists for 4 hours, finally repelling them. And the true heroine was a young 25-year-old woman named Inbar Lieberman. She was in charge of kibbutz security. Inbar heard sounds that sounded different from those heard during other rocket attacks. She ran to the kibbutz armory. She gathered the 12 members of the kibbutz security team and placed them in strategic locations. And together they, later joined by a backup team, defended their kibbutz and spared the members of kibbutz Nir Am from the fate so many others in the area unfortunately faced. This young woman created a fortress that saved the lives and protected the homes of kibbutz Nir Am, a true heroine. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.